And we move to our second speaker, and this is a joint presentation, Adrian Parker and Annakatrin Puhle. They're from the University of Gothenburg, and they will be talking to us about prolonged recall experiences of death.
Yeah, good morning. Welcome, and if you want to follow this in the text, it's on page 84. It may seem a rather morbid subject, but the emphasis is actually on being alive, so it connects with Steve Taylor's presentation. The title, Prolonged Recalled Experiences of Death. This is pushing the boundaries. Jacob mentioned, I think in his introduction, how we can push some of the boundaries. Previously, the whole area of near-death experiences was kind of endless debates, and the conclusion was, well, people are not dead, we don't know what happens when you die. But maybe if you push it a bit further, you can find out more about it. I'm going to mention some of the recent methodology which enables us to actually get experiences from people who've been dead a longer time. I think the record now is it's actually 7 hours, 7 hours, 12 minutes, I think, of cardiac arrest. Okay, the title is a bit of a play on words. I've sort of made it a kind of play on words, but also logical deduction from the title of this article, which, appropriately enough, is about Norwegian research on people who've been subject to longer periods of hypothermia and recovered. The success rate at that period, the review, I think it was 2014, was about 37% recovered, and relatively few had any ill effects from it. So it's using a technique that has been known for many years, I think since the 50s, of making operations on people who are at risk for some kind of brain damage due to asphyxia. So they operate under hypothermia and then gradually raise the temperature. It reduces the risk of lack of oxygen to the brain using this method. And it was applied to first of all, to a woman, the case of Anna Borgenholm. She's a Swedish physician, and she was dead, as it were, with cardiac arrest for 2 hours, but she recovered with relatively few ill effects from it. And she had fallen into a crevice and ice while skiing, and fortunately she had people with her who gave her cardiac pulmonary resuscitation, and but for about 80 minutes she was without any support, so she was dead for about until they began this CPR, and they used this technique of gradually raising the body temperature, and it was successful, and it was applied to other people who ended up in this situation in Norway and Sweden, and it's gradually spread to other countries. Sam Parnia was the first one to actually make the public aware of this in his book called The Lazarus Effect. And he mentioned the case of the Titanic. And he said that many of the people there, I think there were about 1,000 people at loss of life, but hundreds of them could have been saved because the boat that arrived immediately after, well, an hour afterwards, and began to pick up bodies from the sea around, could theoretically, with modern techniques, have enabled some of the people who died to come back to life. So I could have actually shown more big pictures, that there are pictures on internet of them recovering the bodies that's from the ice an hour later, and many of those could have been saved. So a more positive note is an accident that occurred in Denmark, and there were 13 adolescents and 2 adults, I think about 7 of them didn't require any support in terms of this hypothermia technique, but I think, if I recall correctly, there were 5 of these adolescents who were saved using this technique. So it does work, clearly. It is life-saving. But the interesting thing is also that the period that it takes, many of them, when you see the schedule there, that many of them were dead for several hours. So it's dead in the sense of not having a heartbeat. So potentially they will have experiences, or maybe they have experiences. We just don't know, because the remarkable thing is that journalists don't seem to ask these questions, or at least I've never found them being asked on internet. So not even Anna Bogenholm, as far as I'm aware, was asked what she experienced. Maybe they experienced nothing, because there's also a complicating factor that many of them were given anesthetics, at least during operations. If you use hypothermia for operations, you usually get anesthetic. I don't think it's so common with just the recitation. Maybe afterwards they use anesthetics, but not during the point of a recitation, as far as I'm aware. So this is the remarkable miracle of modern medicine. Actually, the first point there I've discovered is not too valid. It's often written in the literature how important it is with CPR, that it's started early. But in the case of Anna Bogenholm, I think it was 80 minutes before they could get access to her to start CPR. In the case of that boat accident, many of them didn't get CPR for several hours. So, and there's this review that I showed earlier of the Norwegian cases. There they didn't start, there they found that CPR wasn't related, wasn't one of the outcome factors. So that's quite amazing, because usually you believe that getting perfusion to the brain, that's supplying the brain with oxygen, is very critical to recovery. But strange enough, the cooling of the brain seems to reduce its need for oxygen, so survival is more guaranteed in these cases. So, a very important paper was published in a high-status journal, the Annals of New York Academy of Science. It's a respectable journal, and it's the guidelines and standards for studying death and recalled experiences of death. It has one of the co-authors is Peter Fennick, and Sam Parnia is the lead author on it. And they emphasize what I think most of us here know, how important it is to give some openness to what people experience. Previously, I think, traditionally, medical doctors just are concerned with the body and its recovery and don't ask what people have experienced. And there's a sort of almost a taboo about asking, what did you experience? So they are pleading here for a greater openness and a greater empathy for what people experience. So hopefully, if these guidelines get some spreading, we will then be able to do more research on this. This is certainly a neglected area, which is the point of our project, is to try to get access to people who've had these longer periods of death, as it were, these periods where the heart has stopped, where there's a depletion of oxygen to the brain. I think after 15 seconds of cardiac arrest, you get a flat EEG, so there's no activity on the surface of the brain. Of course, you can say deeper areas, subcortical areas are still active, but the longer it goes, the harder it is to push this explanation that doesn't take consciousness into account. This is the current neuroreductionist theory. It places emphasis on a finding. It's still actually not a prevalent finding. It occurs maybe a few patients. It's not as though there are hundreds of patients having this spark of activity, but it has been shown in some few patients that where they have had EEGs during the dying period to go on, and they do find there's a gradual reduction in activities you might expect, and then there's a sudden spark. And this, of course, leads people who have this neuroreductionist model to say, this is what is happening during near-death experiences, a sudden spark of neural activity. And as for the experiences people have, well, they're secondary, and people have all sorts of strange experiences. The brain needs to fill in for gaps in memory, and it just fills in from their beliefs and expectations. So this is a traditional explanation for everything. So that has to be, I think, put in contrast with what people experience. So the research plan is both quantitative and qualitative. It's essentially a fishing expedition. We want to find as many people who've had longer periods of death, as well, of cardiac arrest, especially those who've been subject to hypothermia through skiing or accidents, and try to find out if they have experiences. We have to be open to the fact that they may have not. I mean, Sam Parnier's research showed only about 10% of people who have cardiac arrest actually recall a near-death experience. And as I mentioned earlier, there's the effect of anesthetics on memory. So we need to find as many people as possible, and we have questionnaires that we will be giving. So the research questions are quite simple ones. Now, are there any cases of recalled experiences which are still reported after prolonged cardiac arrest? And if so, what frequency and what detail do they occur? And also, what variables may they relate to? We have a couple of scales here, the well-known Grayson near-death experience scale, and there's a life changes scale to see what effect the experiences have upon them. Okay, thank you to the BL Foundation and to Scandinavian International University. I should have put that on the title actually rather than Gothenburg, because Gothenburg wanted to take 60% of the grant, the award. So I was lucky to find a support from Scandinavian International University, who make much more modest claims and support actively our research. Okay, Annakatrin is going to say a few words.
I only want to add that you are very welcome to contact us, because we are really wanting to get as many cases as possible. And if anybody of you has heard anything or has contact to a case, or maybe to a hospital or a physician, we would be very pleased if you just contact us both. And it is a retrospective study and also prospective, so it can be for the future or for the past. Thank you very much.